is stuck on one thought. You notice me? He's sure he hid his presence perfectly with aura. No one should have sensed him. Seeing the cloaked stranger stay quiet, Kettle jumps to a conclusion. He cracks his knuckles and asks if he's a bandit. Kane can only stare, completely baffled. Since he doesn't answer, Kettle takes that as proof. Guess even nice towns have bandits. Kane starts to deny it, then hesitates. Would this kid even believe he's a famous sword master? Instead, Kettle looks at him with pity and asks if things are so bad he had to start robbing people in his old age. Then Kettle gets a great idea. Catching a bandit would look amazing on his mercenary record. Kane just stares, wondering how this conversation got so far off track. Then he has an idea of his own. If Kettle thinks he's a bandit, this is the perfect chance to test him. But the moment he decides, Kettle disappears right in front of him, just gone. Kane whips around in shock, and in the next instant Kettle appears behind him. His eyes glow as he reaches for Kane. Realizing he's about to get grabbed, Kane blasts out green energy to block the attack. Kettle stops, then grins wide. Not bad, old man. You're pretty quick. Kane lands a short distance away, his mind spinning. He can't believe it. Kettle almost caught him, and he moved that fast with raw physical power alone. Kane didn't sense any aura at all. Meanwhile, Kettle just stands there smiling like none of this is a big deal. Kane clenches his teeth. This isn't a test anymore. He's going all out. But again, in an instant, Kettle vanishes. He's way too fast. Before Kane can react, Kettle has already grabbed his arm. The sword master is stunned. Even with all his senses sharpened, he couldn't respond in time. The grip is crushing, like his arm is stuck in solid rock, and his whole body gets dragged along. As he struggles, Kane realizes he can't even match Kettle in strength. The gap is absurd, so he decides to unleash his full power. Kettle notices light gathering in Kane's hand just before the sword master releases a huge wave of energy. The blast erupts in a blinding flash that forces even Kane backward. He lands, breathing hard, his hand still sparking. Kettle is totally fine and says bandits these days have all kinds of tricks. Kane is furious. Why does this idiot keep calling him a bandit? He's seething. That was mana materialization, a technique for elite fighters, and Kettle treats it like some cheap move. But Kettle only stares back with a huge, impressed grin. That leaves Kane speechless. His attack could tear through steel, yet Kettle doesn't have a scratch. Kane stares at his ridiculous body, trying to understand how bare skin took that hit. Kettle steps forward and says it's time to finish this. At that, Kane finally reaches for his sword. But before he can grab the hilt, Kettle's finger stops the draw. Kane's eyes nearly burst from shock. This should be impossible. He pushes with everything he has, but he can't beat the pressure of one finger. Then he looks up and sees Kettle's eyes glowing purple again. A tear of despair runs down Kane's face. He thinks this is the end, and one clean chop knocks him out. Holding the unconscious swordmaster up, Kettle figures this must be what a fantasy world bandit looks like. A few minutes later, he arrives at the guardhouse, dragging Kane along. The guard stammers, asking what this is supposed to mean. He can barely process it. Did this random barbarian really beat a superhuman by himself? Kettle simply announces that he caught a thief. The guard is too shocked to hide it, and Kettle asks if turning him in counts toward his mercenary quest. The guard's brain basically stops working. That's Swordmaster Kane, a living legend, and Kettle is carrying him around like dirty laundry. At last, the guard blurts out that he's not a thief. Kettle's mind jumps right away. So you know him? If he's not the thief, then you must be helping him. Panicking, the guard straightens up and bows to the unconscious man, greeting Swordmaster Kane of the Gehentra Kingdom. You can almost hear the one gear in Kettle's head start turning. He looks down at Kane, confused. A guy called Swordmaster is a normal thief? No way. He doesn't buy it. Kettle insists Kane attacked him for his silver. The guard practically begs him to believe it, saying he'd never mistake that face. While the guard tries to explain, Kettle reaches his own wild conclusion. Maybe Swordmaster is just a cool title for thieves. The guard can only stare, wondering what nonsense he's hearing. After a long, awkward pause, he decides this is way above his pay grade, so he reports it to the Lord. Sometime later, Lord Luke Barkin is losing his mind. What? Lord Kane was defeated? Then comes a painfully awkward apology session. It's a back and forth of my mistake, and no, it was mine. After that, both of them sit in silence so awkward it hurts. From the doorway, Lord Barkin tries to make sense of everything. He expected a clash, sure, but not Kane getting completely crushed. The answer is simple and scary. This barbarian is stronger than a sword master. Even if Kane is the newest one, that title still means a lot. Beating him makes Kettle a dangerous unknown, and Lord Barkin wants no part of this headache. He says there's been a misunderstanding, and leaves them to talk in private. Once the door closes, the room falls right back into awkward silence. The second-hand embarrassment is brutal as Kane takes a shaky sip of tea, his pride completely crushed after that beating. Trying to recover, he formally introduces himself again as Kane the Sword Master. Kettle, being Kettle, asks if Sword Master is his last name. Kane explains that when someone reaches that level, they don't need a surname. Kettle nods, then asks about the strange energy attack from earlier. He wants to know if it's a special skill. Kane casually shows the green energy in his hand and asks if he means this. Right away, Kettle's eyes shine. He admits he first thought it was a dumb little trick, but now that he knows it's a Swordmaster move, he thinks it's awesome. Kane explains that it's called aura, a form of basic energy known as mystic. Now Kettle finally realizes that thing before was aura, like a kid on Christmas. He immediately asks how he can learn it too. Kane explains that mystic is the raw source of power. Swordsmen turn it into aura, while mages use it as mana. Kettle gives a sly grin. So anyone can learn mystic? Can you teach me? Kane goes silent, and Kettle leans in with a smile, asking him to please teach him. In the end, Kane agrees. Still, he doesn't get it. Why ask for his help when Kettle is clearly stronger? Kettle admits he really knows nothing. He's just been fighting on instinct this whole time. That answer brings Kane's spirit right back. This is his chance. He can train the barbarian and win back some of his lost pride. He straightens up and declares, very well. A swordmaster will teach him. A swordmaster is nothing without his blade. Without it, I'm only half a man. KT nods and goes, that makes sense. No wonder you seemed weak, you didn't have your sword. Kane dies inside all over again. And KT keeps making it worse, saying he did think it was strange. If Kane had used his sword, maybe he would have won. KT smiles like he's being nice, completely unaware. Meanwhile, Kane is falling apart inside as his pride gets crushed again. Still trying to hold himself together, Swordmaster Kane starts the lesson. He explains that real swordsmanship isn't just swinging a blade, it's using aura with it. According to Kane, his style can turn illusion into reality. To test him, Kane asks what KT saw when he fought his disciple. KT immediately brings up the sword, splitting into 3 real attacks. So that's materialization, KT says, catching on right away. He even figures out it's a style built on skill and precision, not raw force. Kane confirms it through gritted teeth. Kane straightens up and says a true swordmaster must combine the sword with aura. Then he shows it, pouring energy into his blade until it glows bright green. KT lights up. Oh, so that's aura. Flustered, Kane can only answer, yes. Kane still can't believe he's teaching this to a barbarian, so he decides showing it will work better than explaining. I'll demonstrate, he says, taking his stance. He focuses completely, ready to prove himself. Then he swings down with all his power, sending out a spread of green slashes across the hall, ripping up the floor. KT watches closely without flinching. He notices the strike split into 5 parts. When the dust settles, Kane explains that many people can make illusions with aura, but only his swordsmanship can give them real form. Looking proud, he asks what KT thinks. KT answers with the most brutal, simple line possible. I think I can do that too. Kane instantly calls that nonsense. Inside, he's losing his mind over how long it took him to master this art. KT cuts him off and says it'll be faster to just show him. Then he picks up a huge battle axe, leaving Kane staring in confusion. An axe? KT plants his feet and swings, moving the giant weapon so fast it leaves several clear after images. Kane goes silent. Then the awful truth hits him. KT did it with speed and brute force alone. KT brings the axe down and a huge shockwave carves through the hall in a blazing blast. Kane can only stare in pure shock while smoke rises from KT's axe. With a smug little smile, KT asks, what do you think? He knows exactly what he just did. Kane tries to make sense of it. It looked like illusion turned real, but it was only insane speed and strength. Even he was almost fooled. He says it was just a basic swing, but KT fires back. If the result is the same in a real fight, does the technique really matter? That leaves Kane speechless. He knows KT has a point and it hits his pride hard. Not willing to accept that, Kane snaps, "Then what about this?" In a flash of green aura, he creates several solid clones of himself. This time, KT is truly surprised. It looks like Kane split his own body apart. Kane and the clones attack at once, their combined strike blasting a huge smoking crater into the floor. Kane proudly says this move comes from perfect control of aura. Then he challenges KT to copy it. Kittel doesn't answer. He just braces himself and lifts the giant axe again. He starts spinning faster and faster, turning into a whirlwind of pure destruction. This is bad for Kane. The spin keeps building, making a tornado inside the hall that rips stone from the walls. When it finally stops, Kittel stands calmly in the middle of the wreckage and asks, "What do you think?" That breaks Kane for good. He drops down, shaking and crying that his life's work means nothing. He's done. The great sword master is reduced to a sobbing mess on the floor. Kittel looks down and says his mental toughness is weaker than expected. Then, switching gears, he gives Kane a real compliment. "Your swordsmanship is amazing." Kittel admits all he did was swing his axe fast. That isn't true swordsmanship, just brute force. Kane's technique was different. Those weren't fake after images, they were real. And Kittel says he could never reach that kind of mystery. That tiny bit of praise is enough to revive Kane. His swordsmanship still has value. He declares that making illusion and reality one is a special art only he can use. Just like that, his ego is back. With fire in his eyes, he realizes this isn't a flaw in his style. Kittel is simply abnormal. After all, no normal person could move fast enough to fake that effect without aura. Once Kane settles down, Kittel asks again if he can teach him real sword techniques. Kane quickly regains his composure and apologizes for getting emotional. With most of his pride restored, he finally starts the lesson for real. He says that to control aura, you first have to awaken to mystery. No swordsman or mage can reach the top without it unless they're a cleric borrowing power straight from the gods. Kittel asks if divine power is different from this. Kane says yes. A cleric's power is granted by the gods, not drawn from their own ability. Kittel listens with real interest. Kane goes on to explain that mystery is the hidden power inside every person. How you use it shapes everything, whether it becomes aura, mana, or spirit power. Awakening it is the first big step. Then he reveals there are 5 stages to mastering mystery, and the first is called sensing mystery. Kittel asks if anyone can do it, but Kane says no. Without talent, you can't even feel it. He adds that people who can barely sense it are only considered third-rate. Based on how well someone controls mystery, everyone is placed into one of 5 ranks. Those ranks are third-rate, second-rate, first-rate, superhuman, and finally hero class. Hearing that, Kittel seems to remember something from his past. Kane brushes it off, saying the ranks are only rough guides and not to worry about them yet. After the explanation, Kittel says he understands, and Kane declares it's time for practice. He watches closely, ready to guide Kittel through the first step, sensing mystery. Kane tells him to awaken a sense he's never used before. The instructions are simple. Feel the wind, feel the earth. Kittel focuses as hard as he can, then opens his eyes and admits he feels nothing. Kane is stunned. He thought someone that strong would pick it up easily. He mutters that powerful people are usually better at this, but Kittel seems to be the exception. Kittel says no one from his snowy homeland has ever sensed this kind of power, so Kane moves to plan B, and decides to jumpstart it by sending his own energy into Kittel's body. Kittel lights up. "You're transferring aura?" Kane gives him a vague, something like that. Looking amazed, Kittel agrees he's only read about this in books. Kane puts a hand on his back and tells him to relax and feel the flow. But the moment he touches him, Kane gets hit by a huge shock. What kind of body is this? It feels like touching solid stone, and Kane starts wondering if Kayla's even human. Kayla calls out to him and Kane awkwardly apologizes for zoning out. Then he gets serious and starts pouring aura in, hoping to awaken Kayla's hidden power. Green energy flows into him and Kane is sure this should work. But something is wrong. Kane stops, completely confused. He can't find the path. He can't even get far enough to search for it. To him, it's like trying to find anything inside a huge empty void. In the end, he has to give up. This is a dead end. so Kane pulls back. Kettle immediately panics. What do you mean it won't work? Do I have no talent? Kane tells him it isn't about talent. Kale has to find the path on his own to awaken his power. Kale understands, but he's still worried. So are you saying I can't sense mystery at all? Kane struggles to answer. He couldn't even check Kale's potential because his body is too unusual. It's so unbelievably dense that it acts like armor, blocking the aura from getting in. Kane admits he's never seen anything like it. His raw physical power is basically shutting out magic. Kale slumps, disappointed. So he can't gain mystical power? Kane says he doesn't know for sure. He suggests asking other sword masters or maybe the mages at the magic tower. Kane apologizes, but Kale brushes it off and says it's fine. There may still be a chance. Then he breaks into a big grin, thanking Kane sincerely for all his help. Kane watches him and thinks about the other barbarians he's known. Violent beasts who only cared about fighting. But Kale is different. So Kane asks if he'd stay in the kingdom. He offers loyalty, a title, and a high position. Kale answers plainly, I refuse. I don't plan to belong to anyone. Kane had hoped that winning this barbarian's loyalty might help free them from the Empire, so he tries once more by offering him nobility. Kale just smiles, unmoved by the deal. He'll live his own way. Kane is surprised, but then he seems to understand. He understands. Kale gives him one last sincere thanks and says he won't forget this. Then Kale heads off. Watching him leave, Kane realizes trying to make him submit was foolish. No one is going to own a man like that. He moves only by his own choice, and that mystery may make him more dangerous than any barbarian Kane has known. With a sigh, Kane's mind turns to the Emperor and his obsession with reaching the demon realm. Not long after, Lord Barkin sits at his desk, already aware of the Emperor's goal. Kane reports that lives are being wasted, and guesses the Emperor wants to become like some ruler from the past. Still, he sets that thought aside for now. He goes on to say the Empire hasn't even taken all human lands yet, so this plan is reckless. Barkin understands right away the Emperor will eventually turn his eyes on them too. Kane agrees. Their territory is still counted as part of the Empire, so an order could arrive at any moment. Leaning back, Kane grumbles about the state of the world and the Emperor's madness. Then Barkin's tone changes. He leans in and asks about a rumor. Kane says it's true. Demon activity is getting easier to spot. Dungeons are showing up more often, and rumors say something is leaking out of the demon realm. Whatever it is, it won't end well for anyone. Then Kane adds that Kettle being here at the same time feels strange too. Barkin agrees that is a fair point. Kane asks what he thinks, but Barkin can only admit he doesn't know. At least Kettle hasn't shown any hostility toward them. Other than that, he's a complete mystery. Meanwhile, that mystery himself is out walking around town when he starts feeling that something's off. People keep moving out of his path, even pulling their children away from him. And Kettle's big guess? It must be his clothes. Yep, he decides his beast hide vest probably looks too uncivilized, so he makes up his mind. It's time for new clothes. After a while, he finds a very upscale tailor shop. Nothing bad could come from this, right? The tailor turns around and nearly faints. A barbarian is standing in his fancy shop. Fighting back tears, the man says they don't carry anything Kettle's size. But when he sees Kettle's letdown, he quickly offers to make something custom. That instantly cheers Kettle up, and he happily tells him to do it. The tailor agrees, but inside he's imagining every possible way this giant could kill him if the outfit goes wrong. Later on the way to the guild, something on the ground catches Kettle's eye. It's a small blue orb with a faint glow. So yes, side quest time. He studies it more closely, drawn in by the strange pattern moving inside. Figuring the guild might know something, he picks up the odd item and takes it with him. At the guild, he shows the orb to Rosa and asks if she knows what it is. He sets it in her hand and says he found it in the street. Rosa checks it over. It looks man-made and maybe valuable, but there's no maker's mark. Then her eyes go blank. A second later, snap, Kettle jolts her out of it. For a moment, she just stares ahead like her mind went somewhere else. Kettle asks if she's all right. It looked to him like the orb was pulling her in. Rosa doesn't remember that happening, but she does feel a strange power from it. She offers to get it appraised. Kettle just laughs. He says figuring it out himself is part of the fun, then asks for today's jobs. She gives him the usual F-rank work, cleaning and gathering, and Kettle lights up. Afterward, once another full day of labor is done, He returns to his room completely happy. He takes out the strange orb again, still thinking about what it did to Rosa. Then a soft voice suddenly whispers from inside it. "Come to me." The message repeats, pushing directions straight into his head. Kettle figures it must be domination magic. The orb keeps pulsing with that eerie call, so of course he decides to follow it. The voice leads him to a cave, and he announces that he's here. "I've arrived. Who called me?" A dark voice answers that another sacrifice has entered, mocking him as a stupid barbarian, but an acceptable offering. The speaker is a skeletal mage with blue fire in its eyes. From a throne inside a huge ritual circle, it declares that its resurrection is finally near. So who is this pile of bones? Long ago he was an evil sorcerer who worked from the shadows. He stirred up wars until heroes finally came for him. When defeat closed in, he abandoned his body and sealed his soul in a vessel, turning himself into a lich. That made him nearly impossible to kill, as long as that soul vessel stays safe. To reclaim a body, he hid near this small town and spread those blue orbs to lure sacrifices. The orbs served as power sources for his return and, of course, the usual dreams of ruling everything. The plan was going smoothly until one huge problem showed up. Why is a barbarian here? He chose this remote place to avoid strong people, so Kettle's arrival makes no sense. Watching through magic, the lich decides Kettle's size makes him a perfect sacrifice. His orb only charms people who haven't awakened magical power, so he assumes Kettle is just some magicless fool. That's why he sends the call. "Come in, barbarian. Be the last piece I need." And Kettle walks right up to the cave's giant wooden door. He pushes it open and steps inside. At once he spots the one behind it all, a skeletal mage in robes with glowing blue eyes. Kettle is instantly amazed. It's a real lich, like the final boss from a fantasy story. Now the lich is the confused one. He demands to know what Kettle is. Realizing the mind control failed, Kettle looks at the bones on the floor and figures out how people were being lured in. But the lich still can't sense any magic from him, so his only guess is that Kettle has some rare item protecting his mind. Kettle bluntly says he has nothing like that. The lich stops talking and raises his glowing staff. If Kettle won't obey, then force will do. He summons undead servants and sends them out. The armed skeletons rush straight at him, but Kettle only smirks. So this really is an evil lich in a dungeon. He smacks the first skeleton with one bare-handed hit, and it explodes apart. The lich is stunned. Kettle shakes out his hand and says the lich is a lot less impressive than he expected. That makes the lich snap. He threatens to tear off Kettle's arms and legs and sends in all the rest. Cut him down. Kettle snorts and cracks his knuckles. One punch turns the first skeleton to dust, then a hard kick destroys another. Furious, the lich says the game is over. His staff shines brighter as he calls out his strongest summon. Kettle's eyes widen. A giant armored skeleton knight rises with a huge sword and shield. And instead of panicking, Kettle gets excited. This one might actually be different. The lich orders it to kill him, and the knight charges like a battering ram. Kettle grins and cracks his knuckles again. The knight swings its huge glowing sword, but Kettle just watches. A skeleton knight made by a lich really is unusual, but one punch still caves in its skull. The giant undead falls apart in a blast of bone and debris. The lich can only stare, speechless, after that effortless destruction. As things settle, Kettle stomps on the knight's still-moving hand and crushes it completely. Then he glances back, already bored, and asks if that was all. The lich desperately tries to understand what Kettle is, but his magic finds nothing. No mana, no hidden power, no artifact. It makes no sense. Did this barbarian really beat a top-class undead with only his fists? Realizing Kettle is far too unusual to leave alone, the lich decides to fight him personally. He calls it an honor and floats down like some grand final boss. Suddenly Kettle cries out and staggers back as thick black fog wraps around him. The lich's voice rolls through the cave, telling the barbarian to fear him. He says Kettle will pay for entering his sanctuary. But Kettle only looks puzzled. He says he came because the orb called him. Wasn't the lich the one who left it out there? So yes, the lich basically sent bait into town and Kettle took it. That sets the lich off. He yells for silence and declares himself the great mage who destroyed 5 kingdoms. I am Cardos Brenulus Kessis. Kettle suddenly thinks of the elf queen and starts wondering if absurdly long names are just normal here. Done talking, Cardos fires off a huge vortex. a wave of dark magic. He calls Kettle the base for his return. The spell wraps around Kettle, and his eyes go dull, spinning like he's under a trance. Cardo starts bragging. This is his special spell. It traps people in dark emotions until their minds snap. He's sure a plain barbarian with no magic defense is finished. Easy win. But then something feels wrong. Thinking Kettle may be different, Cardos chooses to capture him instead, and sends his minions in. Another skeleton warrior pulls itself from the ground with its sword ready and moves toward the dazed Kettle. But right before it reaches him, a sharp purple glow flashes in Kettle's eyes. He spins in an instant and kicks the skeleton so hard its whole torso turns to dust. So much for being helpless. Then he looks back at the Lich like nothing happened, and once again, Kartos is left speechless. He can't understand it. How is this possible? That spell should have worked. Kettle barely reacts. He asks if the Lich is just going to keep staring, because it clearly isn't working. Ignoring that, Kartos pours in the rest of his power and starts chanting a dramatic spell. He launches his strongest attack, a giant sphere of dark energy that looks ready to devour everything. And how does Kettle answer a spell like that? His eyes light up like a kid on Christmas morning. Kardos laughs, sure he's won. But a second later, he starts coughing hard and collapses. He burned through all his mana, but he's still sure no barbarian could survive something that big. He looks up expecting a crater, then freezes in terror, because Kettle is still standing there without a single scratch. Kettle even says it was impressive, then asks if that's really all he's got. Kartos completely loses it. He just used his strongest spell, one powerful enough to break a great hero's mind, and it did nothing. He demands to know what Kettle is, but Kettle is more curious than scared. The attack looked amazing, yet he felt nothing. The Lich freezes in fear as Kettle picks up his axe with a cold smile and says it's his turn now. Just before Kettle can smash him to pieces, the Lich suddenly has a realization. A dark grin spreads across his skull as he thinks he's figured it out. Now he's convinced Kettle knows his true identity. He says Kettle came because he knew who he was, and that proves it. Kettle just stands there, wondering what this pile of bones is talking about. Then Kartos breaks into a huge villain laugh, claiming the Empire must fear him if it found him this fast. His ego is out of control. He shouts that he will rise again and destroy the world once more. He's heard stories about a secret Empire project that creates human weapons, and he's sure Kettle is one of them, made for the sole purpose of killing him. Even so, he refuses to go down without a fight. He declares his full name, I am Karos Branulus Kesses, and I will destroy the Empire. Kettle's only thought is simple. This guy has to be crazy. Finally done talking, the Lich summons a glowing ghostly urn. This is his phylactery, his soul vessel. He grabs it, ready to use his last move. Then boom, a huge beam of magic blasts from the urn and slams into Kettle's chest. Kettle's eyes turn white. Did it finally work? The Lich's plan is to force his soul into Kettle's body and take it over. But it's a one-way move. Once inside, he's stuck, unless he becomes a Lich again. Still, it's his only option. He takes control and declares that this body is now his. But the second he enters Kettle's mind, he knows he made a terrible mistake. He looks around in shock, asking what this place is. Is this really the barbarian's mind? Just seeing that nightmare world is enough to shake him. Something is deeply wrong here. He even starts doubting whether the Empire sent Kettle at all. As his soul begins getting torn apart, he realizes no, the Empire couldn't have made something this terrifying. It's literally breaking his mind. With one last confused sound, the great Lich Kratos is erased for good. Back in the real world, Kettle just scratches his head wondering what that was. He only felt a tiny tickle, and that's it. In front of him, the Lich's body drops to the floor, empty. You'd think he'd be happy, but Kettle is actually disappointed. He thought the attack looked cool and wanted to know what kind of magic it was. He walks over to the bones, thinking Liches in this world are pretty weak. He has no clue what happened inside his own head. Still, a win is a win. So now it's time to collect the loot. He picks up the Lich's staff, remembering it glowed when magic was used. That gives him an idea. Maybe this magic stick will finally let him use magic too. So he stores it away, or as Kettle puts it, in his pocket. Then he notices another item, the urn. He picks it up and guesses it's a life vessel, so he plans to take it to Rosa for appraisal. After gathering everything, he looks around and suddenly his gamer instincts kick in. He notices a strange pattern on the wall that he missed before. A secret room? He wonders, then does exactly what you'd expect. He presses the button. Sure enough, the wall slides open and reveals a hidden chamber. He steps inside and finds a room packed with people just standing there like statues. His first reaction isn't concern, it's amazement that secret rooms are actually real. Then comes the second thought. Who are these people? He waves a hand in front of one man's face and calls out to him. He tries another person too, asking if anyone is still in there, but gets nothing. Now he's stuck wondering what to do with a room full of living statues. In the end, he decides the best move is to leave it alone. For once his logic makes sense. The guild can handle it. So back at the mercenary guild, Kettle walks in with his new loot. Rosa greets him with a smile, surprised he's back so soon. Kettle just says he had a few things to handle. Nothing major, just wiping out an ancient evil. Rosa looks confused, and Kettle explains the orb and who sent it. She laughs it off, telling him not to joke about something that serious. After all, a lich one of only 5 in the whole world hiding in a small town sounds ridiculous. So Kettle drops the giant purple urn on her desk. That gets her attention fast. He calmly says it's the lich's life vessel and asks if she can appraise it. Rosa's mind basically shuts down. She goes still as she realizes he's telling the truth. Then Kettle casually mentions there are people inside too. He says he could have brought them out, but they looked half gone, so he left that to the guild. And then it hits Rosa. She finally links the lich to the recent missing people. She jumps up and says she'll call someone right away. A few minutes later, a city guard rushes in asking if someone said lich. Kettle gives a small wave and greets him. Then he says it's already taken care of. The guard nervously says the lich's long fantasy name, and when Kettle confirms it, the man nearly shuts down. This Kratos was a legendary dark mage. A century ago, he drove kings mad and erased 5 kingdoms from the map. The guard can't believe something like that was hiding near their village. Kettle shrugs and says the lich wasn't that amazing. He did some weird stuff and pretty much beat himself. The guard has no response. Sweating hard, the guard asks for more details, but Kettle's one working brain cell is done for the day. That's all he's got. Realizing this is far above his rank, the guard leaves to report it straight to the Lord. When the news reaches Lord Barkin, he is not pleased. A lich this close to my land, he roars. The guard confirms everything. He has testimony from the rescued victims, and the lich's phylactery is proof. Barkin immediately sees the problem. A lich of this level will draw the Empire's attention, and his best fighter is away. This is bad. He slams a fist on the desk and gives the order to send a message to the capital at once. Barkin admits they were incredibly lucky. If Kettle hadn't found Kratos right after his return, they would have been the first to die. He knows the timing was perfect, but the feat is still unbelievable. This barbarian deserves a real reward. He wonders what you even give a man who can beat a legendary lich alone. The next morning, urgent shouts echo through the castle. Barkin, already awake, calmly tells them to let the person in. The doors fly open, and a panicked maid rushes in. My lord, the sun god's inquisitor, Lord Aquaz, has arrived. Barkin's eyes widen in shock. Why would someone that important come all the way to his small territory? And there she is. The sun god's inquisitor has arrived. Later, Barkin sits across from her and gives his formal greeting as the lord of this land. She introduces herself as Aquaz, inquisitor of the sun god, a judge who punishes the lost. Barkin already knows exactly who she is, the youngest and strongest inquisitor on the continent. She's famous for hunting warlocks, and her authority is absolute. Aquaz gets straight to the point, saying his territory is a bit of a mess. Barkin tries to play it down, hoping she isn't here because of the lich. So he finally asks why she came. She looks at him and says she's here because of a divine revelation. Barkin is stunned, but before Aquaz shares the divine message, she asks for something first. She wants to hear about the recent incident. As he explains what happened, she grows more and more shocked. A barbarian beat the lich? Barkin says yes, and adds that the lich was the infamous Kartos. That name hits Aquaz hard. What? That monster was here? To prove it, Barkin shows her the phylactery. The moment she sees the urn, her calm facade breaks. What happened in this place? She whispers. Gripping her holy symbol, her thoughts race around one question. Is the barbarian still in town? Barkin confirms it. Yes, the absurdly strong barbarian is still in his territory. He adds that this man keeps doing the impossible, then casually mentions Kettle also beats Swordmaster Kane. That leaves Aquaz speechless. Now she knows a new powerhouse has appeared, and quickly asks what tribe he comes from. Barkin says Kettle claimed he was from the White Wasteland. That answer hits Aquaz like a blow. The White Wasteland, the snowy desert, is demon land, and she does not like hearing that. Then a thought suddenly clicks. The pieces start coming together. An unknown force from a demon-filled land. She wonders if this barbarian might be the very reason she was sent here. Barkin is left completely confused. Aquaz, now fully decided, says she has to meet this barbarian in person, immediately. Meanwhile, Kettle is back in his room, looking over the gem he took from the Lich's staff. He figures it probably boosts magic, then decides he can ask a mage about it later. That thought ends fast when he realizes morning has already come. Time to start the day. Right then, a guard arrives with a message. The sun god's inquisitor wants to meet him at the church. The guard gives him a quick warning. Show proper respect when he meets her. Kettle just smiles and says not to worry. The guard, a bit thrown off, asks if he's ready to go. Now dressed in his barbarian gear, Kettle grins. Let's go. Quick world note. The gods here are completely real. They give people power, and the church is the center of that whole system. The guard leads Kettle through the city and stops before the huge church. Kettle looks up and immediately gets excited. He's clearly impressed by the sun god's church. The guard tells him someone will meet him inside, so Kettle thanks him and walks in. He opens the doors and steps into the holy building. Inside, 3 nuns greet him at once. Welcome, Sir Kettle. One of them adds that Inquisitor Aquaz is waiting and offers to lead the way. They bring him to a flower-filled room where a woman stands waiting. She turns and introduces herself as Aquaz, Inquisitor of the Sun God, clearly here for business. Kettle smiles and introduces himself as Kettle the Barbarian. To him, she looks pretty young for an Inquisitor. That only makes him think she must be very capable to rise that high so fast. Aquaz, meanwhile, is already suspicious, wondering why this giant is smiling. Kettle gets right to the point and asks why he was called here. She says it's about the dungeon incident. The lich he killed was Kartos, a famous monster responsible for countless deaths. According to her, Kartos was so powerful that only true heroes could normally face him. Kettle says he's heard the legends, but the lich he met fought like an idiot and basically took himself down. When she clearly doesn't believe him, he closes his eyes and says that's simply what he